Since we've gotten most of the confusing runewords out of the way, it's time we look at some of the more popular runeword bases, this time with one of the best bases for players in the game, axes. As usual, since I'm not made of runes, you'll see these are not all made in axe bases, but they will all work in axe bases, both one-handed and two-handed. It's also worth noting, thanks to the strength and variety of axe bases, most of these will have at least some use case, meaning trying to rank them from best to worst would be difficult at best because it varies wildly based on the character you're playing. Also, with 24 runewords possible in axes, we're going to skim over the usual "you shouldn't make these in axes" runewords of Fortitude, Venom, and Wind. As usual, the reasons are with Fortitude that it's better saving those runes, especially the low from El, Sol, Dol, and Low, for armor and better weapons, and there's better uses of the axe bases as well. And with Venom and Wind, they're just out of sync with their cost and level requirements, with Venom having normal stats for Nightmare, basically costs with Tal, Dol, and Maul, and Wind being Nightmare stats with Hell costs of Sur and El. That said, speaking of cost versus effect, we can thankfully move on to our budget runewords first, starting with Steel. Costing only Tier and L, this is a super cheap and useful early runeword for normal difficulty, and it works great in faster axe bases with the attack speed boost giving them a little extra haste. It does have a 50% bleed and a spattering of other nice, albeit minor mods that are exceptional for the cost. Another similar budget option is Malice. In axes, it's usually found by slapping Ith, L, and Eth into a shopped military pick from Farah in Act 2 Normal. This weapon is popular for a lot of uses, and while more well known for being placed in flails and polearms, it works just fine in axes too if that is your preferred weapon type. Next up for budget is Strength. For Am and Tier, you can make yourself a weapon with Life Leech, Crushing Blow, and other useful mods. It can be useful in normal difficulty bases or even Nightmare difficulty bases for just a steady, reliable weapon, and works pretty well in the faster axe bases. And last of what I'd consider true budget would be Honor. Taking 5 sockets, it does limit the bases it can go into, but it's still just an all-around good weapon for the cost of Am, El, Ith, Tier, and Soul, and is one of my go-to weapons for starting low characters. This is because it's just like a list of nice-to-haves with plus skills, good damage boost, life leech, deadly strike, stats, etc., all in just one simple little weapon. Moving out of budget, we move into the long list of runewords ranging from quirky to awesome, though our first isn't really something I bother putting entirely on either list, outside of some niche cases, and that is Silence. Costing Dol, Eld, Hell, Is, Tier, and Vex, it's got great bonuses, attack speed, hit recovery, damage, blind, mana leech, a whopping 75% resist all, but also, unfortunately, thanks to the Dol rune, it also has Monster Fleeing, which gives it a layer of suckage. After that, though, we're pretty much golden, with almost every one of the rest of these having a use, even if it is sometimes out of line with the cost. Though this first one is perfectly in line with cost, and that's Call to Arms. Plus skills, attack speed, damage, life leech are all nice mods, but this also packs in Barbarian Shouts, and are the main reason to spend the slightly more pricey Am, Rawl, Maul, Ist, and Om. Usually made in easier to equip stuff, it's still not a terrible axe option if you want to go for those style points. Another runeword that less people make in axes but is still fun is Passion, the Zeal runeword. At the cost of Dol, Ort, Eld, and Lem, it's not as expensive as other late options and still offers nice mods for damage, speed, attack rating, and a few other things, though it does still have the flee from Dol. Sometimes the Zeal point is just worth it though. Up next is Crescent Moon, and while this is in a phase blade here because I use it as a melee weapon, this also has uses for a number of odd builds you might not expect that don't necessarily have to be in an indestructible weapon. And costing only Shale, and Tier, it's very budget friendly if you want to make a few specialized ones. And it is a good source of static field, reduced enemy lightning resistance, and a number of other actually really nice mods. After that, we have another specialist weapon. This time, I do usually make this in axes, and that is Doom, the Holy Freeze Axe. For Hell, Low, and Cham, it's expensive as sin, but it packs, plus all skills, a Holy Freeze aura, solid enhanced damage and attack speed, deadly strike, open wounds, prevent heal, freeze target, and a massive penalty to enemy cold resist. It's expensive, but it's also quite strong, so it may not win the best bang for the buck award, but it still deserves some decent recognition. After that, we'll take a break with some ethereal fun, starting with Eternity, which works well in a number of axe bases with the cost of Am, Bear, Is, Soul, and Sur. It's reasonable for the cost with damage, life leech, crushing blow, blind, slow, and even some cannot be frozen. The only big drawback of it is a lack of increased attack speed, which at that cost you'd kind of expect, but it doesn't matter to every build, but it puts it in a weird place of never really being best in slot, but always just being kind of good. Another ethereal rune word is Oath. This lacks a lot of the perks of Eternity, but it comes packing a massive attack speed boost, bone spirit on striking, and decent damage, alongside a prevent monster heal function, which can be pretty useful. I personally find it relatively balanced with its expensive but not ungodly expensive cost of Shale, Pull, Maul, and Lum, and it really doesn't get the attention it deserves because it also sits in the same slot of Eternity of being not necessarily best in slot, but still quite good. After that, we move on to an elemental friend of these that unfortunately isn't indestructible, but is still fun, and that is Famine, costing Fal, Ohm, Ort, and Ja. It's a bit expensive, but it is a fun little weapon, just packing a lot of elemental damage, increased attack speed, enhanced damage, prevent heal, and life leech. It's just an all-arounder of a weapon that's hard to deny the usefulness of. Though on an axe, you will be needing to repair it quite often due to the lower durabilities available, though that's true of pretty much all the non-indestructible axe runewords. After that, we'll throw in a rune word I actually forgot to put in earlier, and that's Fury, Ja, Gull, and Eth. While I love it in axes, I understand why some people don't, especially due to repair costs, but it is a ton of fun on a Frenzy Barb. Though there are better flavors than axe, it's still quite solid with increased attack speed, ignore defense, enhanced damage, life leech, open wounds, deadly strike, and a natural 5 to frenzy for barbarians. It's still fun, just not really as strong as it was before the expanded runewords came to kind of knock it out of its place. Into the more quirky stuff, we have Phoenix, which I would love even more if the Firestorm didn't interrupt so many things, but beyond that, for Vex, Low, and Jaw, this pricey runeword does keep you topped off with Redemption Aura, has good damage and mana leech, as well as some other handy mods like ignoring target defense and deadly strike. As I've played more, I've sadly moved to using it mostly on ranged or slow-hitting characters, but it's still fun regardless. We also, of course, still have Phoenix's sister weapon, Hand of Justice, costing Sur, Cham, Am, and Low. It's expensive, but swaps out Redemption for Holy Fire, gives up a little base damage boost for increased attack speed, and slaps on some Blind and Freeze while retaining the reduction in enemy fire resist. Oh, and it ditches Firestorm too, so you don't have to worry about interrupts. Just as fun as Phoenix though, but will be burning through durability, of course, as they tend to do. Next is Kingslayer, a runeword that sometimes gets forgotten, but may see a resurgence with the attack speed bug, though only time will tell. For Mal, Gull, and Fal, there are better and cheaper options for exploiting it, but it does pack solid attack speed, enhanced damage, crushing blow, open wounds, and even has a plus to Vengeance if you're feeling a weird itch to use, well, Vengeance. It can be fun for odd builds, but it's most often overlooked for more popular runewords. Moving into the home stretch, we have runewords most of you have probably heard of or seen tossed around, though starting with the most obscure to the more well-known, we'll start with Death, costing Hell, El, Vex, Ort, and Gull. It's reasonably priced for the effects, with indestructibility being one of its claims to fame, but also solid damage, mana leech, attack rating, and of course, 50% crushing blow, and a scaling deadly strike bonus. It can be a gnarly weapon to smack things around with, and I have 2 ethereal ones because I was bound and determined to make the horrible pun of making a Death Frenzy Barbarian as a reference to an anime not for the faint of heart. More familiar will be our next runeword, Beast, Bear, Tier, Mal, and Lum. This is the Werebear runeword and one of the 2 Fanaticism runewords in the game, with increased attack speed, crushing blow, open wounds, stats, and enhanced damage. It's not a bad weapon on its own, but you'll often see it used for the Werebear and Lycanthropy charges to make even more popular niche builds like the Bear Source, or more silly builds like the Barbarian. These last 3 though, if you've read any guides, you'll probably know by heart, starting with the equally most overrated and underestimated runeword, Last Wish, costing Jaw, Maul, Jaw, Sur, Jaw, and Bear. It sounds like you're just saying yes a lot, but it comes with Fade and Life Tap procs, a decent level Might Aura, Crushing Blow, Ignore Target Defense, and Blind, not to mention a bit of Magic Find. There's a long-standing argument between this and Grief, and while Grief is mathematically better in most cases, there are situations where Last Wish can easily come out on top if you know what you're going for. Speaking of Grief though, that is next with Eth tier low Maul and Rawl. It's pretty affordable for the fact that it's considered one of the best weapons in the game in a Phase Blade, and it's nothing to scoff at in an axe either. With increased attack speed, the highly desirable damage plus mod, and a handful of other nice perks, this weapon can be a bit of a sleeper because it doesn't display damage in the way most people would notice. Due to how the damage plus mod is added to the formula, it gets amplified very quickly and quietly. Last up is a very common runeword for ethereal berserker axes, and that is Breath of the Dying, costing Vex, Hell, Eld, Zod, and Eth. Outside of the Zod rune, it's reasonably easy to get all the stuff for in relation to the effects. That said, it's indestructible with massive attack speed and damage, dual leech plus all attributes, and several other solid mods. It's a really strong weapon. Would I use it over Grief? Probably not, but it's totally got the style points, especially in an ethereal berserker, which could sit over 500 max damage on the weapon alone. Do you have a favorite axe runeword, or even an axe build? Mention it down below, and what's your favorite axe in that case? Are you itching for Ettins? Are you looking for Glorious Battle? There are a lot of options to be had, and a special thanks to patrons, members, and viewers for letting us chat about those options today.